I want to conclude by sharing with you one of the thousands of stories from the survivors of 9/11. Her name is Janelle. 10 years later, she still works for the Port Authority, as she did when she clocked into the World Trade Center at 8:05 a.m. on Tuesday morning, September 11, 2001. She says, today, even I still wonder what would have happened if I had left my office on the 64th floor of the North Tower earlier and escaped from that building unharmed. What if I hadn't been buried in debris, the ground falling out beneath me at the 13th floor as I was racing to get out of that building? What if I hadn't been stuck under that rubble for 27 hours before rescuers finally found me? I would have been grateful, but I wouldn't have looked any deeper at my life. I would have chalked up my survival to quick thinking or quick moving or just plain luck. I would have gone on avoiding God the way I had been doing ever since I lost my mother to cancer in 1999. How many of you know we are indelibly marked by the tragedies in our lives? Instead, I laid there trapped in the darkness after that building had collapsed, rethinking my life. Then I ended up doing what my mother would have done. I prayed. I hadn't prayed to God for a long time, but I decided that day to pray to God. And it was more like pleading and screaming and begging and yelling and asking God for some kind of miracle. Some kind of miracle, any kind of miracle, until I pushed my hand through a few inches of the rubble above my head, and I felt someone's warm hand close around mine. And then I heard a male voice say the 4 sweetest words I've ever heard. I've got you, Janelle. I clung as much as I could to those reassuring words as to that strong hand. My name is Paul, he said. You're going to be okay. They're going to get you out soon. The ache in my right leg and the throbbing in my head faded as I held Paul's hand and listened. Don't worry, I've got you, Paul said. They're almost here. You just hang on. Finally, I saw a glimmer of light through the darkness, and I heard other voices and heard distant sirens. There were 2 volunteers from Massachusetts who found me with the help of a police officer from Canada and his search and rescue dog, Tracker. They're here, Paul said. You're in good hands now. I'm going to go and let them do their jobs and get you out. I never felt him release my hand, but soon I was holding someone else's hand, a firefighter, and talking to my rescuers as they painstakingly removed twisted steel and chunks of concrete from all around me. And slowly they lifted me up. Hundreds of helpers handed me over the pile of rubble to an ambulance. And I heard all of these people cheering, and I kept saying Paul's name to myself so I wouldn't forget it. I wanted to make sure that I thanked him. There were 3 promises I made to God that day. I promised God that I would do these 3 things as soon as I got out of the hospital. I promised him that I would join a church, that I would get baptized, that I would marry my long-time boyfriend, and that I would find Paul and thank him. On November 7th, after 6 weeks in the hospital and 4 surgeries and hours of physical therapy and rehabilitation, I was able to keep the first 2 promises. I got married at City Hall to my boyfriend, and I was baptized that evening at the Brooklyn Tabernacle Church. But Paul, I never found him. Even when CNN reporters brought me together with my other rescuers, Paul's identity remained a total mystery. He wasn't the firefighter who held my hand. That was later when I heard the sirens and people began digging me out. Somehow Paul had already known my name before I even said a word. Who was he? I didn't know what else to do. So I called my pastor and I asked him what he thought about it. Janelle, my pastor said, Paul did not exist in the flesh. You were asking God for a miracle. And God sent you a miracle in the form of an angel named Paul. So you understand why I celebrate and mourn every September 11th. I mourn the loss of so many, many lives. My friends from work. People who walked down the stairs with me and did not make it out. Yet there is so much to be grateful for. My survival, which still remains a wonder to me. My health, although I walk with a slight limp, most people don't notice it. My family, my husband, and my beautiful 4 children, and the good life we have together. But most of all, I celebrate my restored relationship with God. People can debate whether Paul was an angel or whether it was just a coincidence, but I know who rescued me. I know through the strong hand that reached out for mine when I was buried alive. And I know that reassuring voice I heard when I cried out for help. Someone called me by my name, and I have never been the same. Someone called me by my name, and I have never been the same. Usually the threat of death makes us a lot more aware of our lives. 9/11 reminds us, even 10 years later, that God is still calling our names. Quite often, we forget that the very idea of redemption has some spiritual necessities attached to it. What's that, preacher? That we must answer. We must respond. We must heed God's call on our lives. Whether we know it or not, we are all bound together, not by our own will, but by divine will. We are all bound together even when we choose to ignore it and live our own lives by pretending that we are not accountable to God. You can only reap what you sow. And so as the people of God, we are called to sow good seeds, both in our lives and in the lives of others, so that we can reap a harvest of right relationships.